The gas giant below was a bruised swirl of violet and ochre, a titanic eye staring up at the insignificant speck of metal orbiting its equator. Vanguard Academy did not look insignificant from the inside. However, it was a rotating ring of high-tensile steel and transparasteel, a city suspended in the vacuum, designed to turn sentient beings into weapons. The station smelled of ozone, recycled air, and the underlying metallic tang of aggression. In the primary docking bay, the gravity plating hummed with a subsonic frequency that set teeth on edge. It was a frequency designed to agitate, to keep the adrenal glands of the thousands of arriving cadets operating at peak efficiency. Sarah's Vane stepped off the diplomatic shuttle and felt the vibration in the hollow of her bones. She did not let it show. She did not let anything show. She was Veleran. Her people were sculpted from grace and politics, their evolution guided by a matriarchy that viewed biological imperfection as a moral failing. Saris was tall, her skeletal structure long and delicate, covered in skin the color of pale moonlight. Faint, bioluminescent patterns traced the line of her spine and the sharp angles of her collarbones, glowing with a soft, rhythmic pulse that matched her heartbeat. To the casual observer, she looked like a piece of art, something fragile to be kept in a glass case. That was the point. She moved through the chaotic throng of the arrival deck, her luggage floating silently behind her on a grav tether. Around her, heavy worlders with thick chitinous armor shoved past furry bipeds from high-gravity moons. The air was a cacophony of growls, clicks, and the harsh bark of basic. These were the Predator Cadets, the future shock troops of the Galactic Compact. They were here to learn how to kill. Saris was here to decide if they needed to die. Her hand brushed the fabric of her uniform, a pristine white that stood out against the dark grays and tactical blacks of the other cadets. Somewhere deep in the sublayers of her mind, a command code pulsed, a gift from the High Matriarch. Her mother. Assess, her mother had said, her voice cold as the void outside. The Compact grows arrogant. The Predator program is no longer just about peacekeeping. Rumors reach the throne of conditioning, of monsters being bred rather than trained. If they threaten Velera, you will find the proof. If they are useful, you will ensure our leash remains around their necks. Saris tightened her mental shields. She was a spy, an inspector, and a hostage, all wrapped in a package of beautiful alien diplomat. If she failed, the Academy would consume her. If she succeeded, she would likely be discarded anyway. I am not a predator, she told herself, reciting the mantra she used to suppress the engineered toxicity in her own blood. I am a diplomat. I am civil. But as a passing cadet, a hulking reptilian creature with scars mapping his snout slammed his shoulder into hers on purpose. Saris felt it, the spike of dopamine, the microsecond calculation of trajectory, the sudden overwhelming urge to drive her fingers into the soft gap between his scales and sever his spinal column. She stopped. She took a breath. She forced the bioluminescence on her skin to dim, hiding the flare of aggression. She bowed her head slightly, letting the reptile laugh and walk away. Civil, she repeated, but the lie tasted like copper in her mouth. Elias Ward was lost, and he was starting to get angry about it. The Academy was a labyrinth. It was designed that way, supposedly to test the navigational instincts of the cadets. But Elias suspected it was actually just because the architects were sadists. He adjusted the strap of his duffel bag, his shoulder aching where an old shrapnel wound had never quite healed right. He was human, 24 years old, which made him ancient compared to the 19-year-old prodigies flooding the corridors. He had the face of someone who had seen too many sunsets on too many bad worlds. His eyes were dark, rimmed with the exhaustion of a 3-day transport flight from the frontier, and his jaw was set in a permanent line of stubborn resistance. He wasn't supposed to be here. He was supposed to be in a brig on Cestus 4. Insubordination. The charge sheet had read, refusal to obey a direct order in a combat zone. The order had been to level a settlement to flush out insurgents. The settlement had been full of non-combatants. Elias had refused. He had punched his commanding officer in the throat when the man tried to override him. Now, instead of a court-martial, he had been given a choice: Vanguard Academy or a penal colony. The brass wanted to see if his distinct lack of self-preservation could be weaponized. Sector 7, Elias muttered to himself, looking at the holographic map projecting from his wrist implant. Quarters are in Sector 7, this is Sector 9. He turned a corner, expecting another gray corridor filled with lockers and weapon racks. Instead, he walked into a wide, high-ceilinged observation deck dominated by a massive viewport overlooking the gas giant. The light in the room was dim, filtered to a soft amber. In the center of the room, someone was moving. Elias stopped. It was the alien girl he had seen on the manifest feeds, the Velaran. She was wearing a skin-tight bodysuit that left little to the imagination. But Elias wasn't looking at her body in that way. He was looking at how it moved. She was standing on one leg, her other leg extended straight up at an impossible angle. Her spine arched backward so far her head nearly touched her calf. It looked excruciating. Then, with a motion so slow it was almost hypnotic, she uncoiled. Her arms swept out, fingers rigid, slicing the air with surgical precision. She flowed from one impossible posture to another, a silent dance of contortion and balance. Elias watched, fascinated. It looked like some high-end, terrifying version of the yoga classes his aunt used to take back on Earth, mixed with a seizure. He stepped forward, the magnetic soles of his boots clicking loudly on the deck plates. The girl froze. She didn't stumble. She didn't wobble. She simply stopped mid-extension, her body locked in a pose that defied gravity, and rotated her head to look at him. Her eyes were solid violet, no pupil, no sclera. "Sorry," Elias said, holding up a hand. "I didn't mean to interrupt the workout. I'm looking for Sector 7. I think I took a wrong turn at the gravity lift." Sarah slowly lowered her leg, planting her foot silently on the floor. She straightened up, towering over him by 2 inches. Her skin pulsed with a faint, annoyed blue light. "A workout," she repeated. Her voice was melodic but flat, stripped of intonation. "Yeah." Elias gestured vaguely at her. "The stretching, the breathing. Is that a Velaran thing? Like Pilates? Good for the core, I bet." Sarah stared at him. She was performing the kata of the silent void, a meditative combat sequence designed to prepare the mind for the execution of political rivals. The movement he had walked in on was a simulation of eviscerating a target while keeping one's formal robes unstained. "It is for fitness," Sarah said, deciding that explaining the nuance of ritualistic murder to a human with dirt on his boots was not worth the caloric expenditure. "Sector 7 is 3 levels down. Take the maintenance shaft. It is faster." "Right," Elias said. He squinted at her. "You're that diplomat transfer, right? Vane?" "Cadet Vane," she corrected. "And you are lost." "Story of my life," Elias grinned. It was a crooked, charming grin that usually worked on bartenders and supply officers. Saris did not smile back. She looked at him as if he were a particularly uninteresting data point. "Go," she said. Elias blinked, his grin fading. "Friendly place, this academy. Can't wait to meet the rest of the class." He turned and walked away. Saris watched him go, her eyes narrowing. She had analyzed his gait, his muscle density, and the slight favor he gave his left shoulder. He was damaged goods, a soldier who had survived but only just. He saw her dance and thought it was exercise. Good. Let them all think she was soft. Soft things were ignored until they were close enough to strike. The mess hall was a cavernous space designed to accommodate 50 different species, which meant the acoustic engineering was a nightmare and the smell was atrocious. Squad Carax held court in the center of the room. They were the elite, the golden children of the Predator program. There were 12 of them, a mixed unit of heavy worlders and apex predators hand-picked for their brutality. Krogan, the squad leader, was a massive slab of muscle from a high-gravity colony world. He had a jaw like a hydraulic press and eyes that looked like wet stones. He was currently throwing food pellets at a smaller avian cadet who was too terrified to move. "Eat it," Krogan grunted. "Builds character." The squad laughed. It was a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through the tables. Saris entered the mess hall with her tray. She moved through the crowd like water, avoiding contact, her gaze fixed on an empty table near the waste recyclers. She wanted to be invisible. "Hey, glow stick!" The shout cut through the din. Saris paused, her hand hovering over her tray. She did not turn around. "I'm talking to you, princess!" Krogan boomed. He stood up, kicking his chair back. The mess hall went quiet. The hierarchy of the academy was being established, and everyone wanted to see who was on the bottom. Krogan walked over to her, his squad flanking him. They formed a wall of flesh and armor. Saris turned slowly, up close. The size difference was comical. Krogan was nearly 7 feet tall and wide as a bulkhead. Saris looked like a glass figurine standing in the path of a landslide. "You're the Velarin," Krogan sneered, leaning down. His breath smelled of raw meat and chemical stimulants. "I heard you people don't fight. You just talk people to death. That true?" "We prefer diplomacy," Saris said. Her voice was calm, barely a whisper. "Violence is an admission of failure." "Is that right?" Krogan laughed. He reached out and flicked the crest of sensitive skin on her throat. It was a violation of personal space so profound that a hush fell over the room. "Well, here at Vanguard, we like to fail. We like to fail hard." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a predatory purr. "We're having a little welcome party tonight. Training Dome 4, 1900 hours. You should come. We can show you some diplomacy." The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. It wasn't just a threat of violence, it was a threat of domination. It was a challenge to her biology, to her gender, to her very right to exist in their space. "I have studying to do," Saris said, her eyes fixed on the center of his chest. "I wasn't asking," Krogan said. He poked her again, harder this time. "Don't make us come get you, princess. It's messy when we have to come get you." He laughed again and turned away, his squad trailing behind him like a pack of wolves. Saris stood motionless. Her tray was still balanced perfectly in her hands. Inside her chest, her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "Kill him." The instinct screamed. Throat, eyes, knees, kill him now. She took a deep breath, forced the bioluminescence to fade to a dull, fearful gray, and sat down to eat her nutrient paste. Elias had seen the whole thing from the upper gantry. He held a half-eaten protein bar in his hand, his appetite gone. "Bad idea," muttered the cadet next to him, a four-armed insectoid who was frantically polishing a rifle. "What is?" Elias asked. "Messing with Carax. They have immunity. The admirals love them. That girl, she is going to get broken." Elias looked down at Saris, eating alone in the corner. She looked small, defenseless, and yet there was something about the way she held her spoon. Precise, controlled. Maybe, Elias said. Or maybe Krogan just bit off more than he can chew. She is a diplomat, the insectoid clicked derisively. She is prey. Elias didn't answer. He had a notification blinking on his retinal display. A scheduled maintenance rotation for the training domes at 1900 hours. He wasn't assigned to it, but he could override the roster. He told himself it was just curiosity. He told himself he just wanted to make sure nobody got killed. But as he watched the Velaran girl finish her meal and rise with that terrifying, fluid grace, he knew he was lying. He wanted to see what happened when the prey refused to run. Training Dome 4 was a vast, hemispherical arena simulated to look like an urban ruin. Broken concrete pillars jutted from the floor, and flickering holographic fires cast long, dancing shadows. Saris stood in the center of the kill zone. She wore her standard training gray fatigues, which were loose-fitting and practical. She carried nothing. The airlock hissed shut behind her. The sound was final. From the shadows, 12 shapes emerged. Squad Carracks. They were not wearing training gear. They were wearing casual fatigues, knuckles taped, heavy boots laced tight. This wasn't a sanctioned sparring match. This was a beating. Krogan stepped into the light. He cracked his neck, the sound like a pistol shot. "You came," he said, sounding almost disappointed. "I thought you'd run to the administration. I had a betting pool going." "I am a cadet of this academy," Saris said. Her hands were empty, hanging loosely at her sides. "I do not run from training." "Training," one of the other cadets snickered, a lean, wiry female with razor-sharp quills for hair. "Is that what you think this is?" They circled her. The formation was classic pack hunting. Cut off the exits, confuse the target, overload the senses. They jeered and stomped, creating a rhythm of intimidation. "You're pretty," Krogan said, closing the distance. "For a glow stick, maybe if you beg nicely, we'll only break one arm. Maybe we'll find other uses for you." The sexual menace was a heavy, suffocating blanket. It was designed to trigger panic, to make the victim small and pliable. Saris watched them. She was not panicking. She was processing. Target 1, heavy worlder. Slow twitch muscle fibers, high center of gravity. Target 2, avian lineage, hollow bones, vulnerable sternum. Target 3. She analyzed all 12 of them in the span of 3 seconds. She mapped the geometry of the room. She noted the weapon dispenser on the wall, 5 meters to her left. "Please," Saris said, her voice trembling slightly. It was a perfect affectation of fear. "We do not have to do this. This is against regulations." "Regulations are for the weak," Krogan roared. He lunged. It was a clumsy grab, meant to seize her by the throat and lift her off the ground. He expected her to flinch, to cower. She did not flinch. As Krogan's hand closed around her neck, Saris moved. It wasn't a step. It was a phase shift. She dropped her center of gravity, twisting her hips and driving her forearm into the bundle of nerves on the inside of Krogan's elbow. His arm went numb, his grip failing instantly. In the same motion, she spun, using the momentum to launch herself toward the wall. She slapped the emergency panel on the dispenser. Weapon request, non-lethal, standard Baton. A cylinder of black composite plastic shot out of the slot. Saris caught it in midair. It was a weighted stick, 24 inches long, padded to prevent permanent injury. It was a tool for riot control, not war. She landed in a crouch, the baton humming as she flicked it to extend its telescopic tip. The squad paused, confused. The prey had teeth. "Get her!" Krogan screamed, clutching his numb arm. The remaining 11 cadets charged. What followed was not a fight. It was a dismantling. Elias, watching from the high-maintenance gantry where he had hacked the door lock, stopped breathing. Saris exploded into motion. She was a blur of white and gray, a ghost woven from kinetic energy. The first cadet, a four-armed brawler, swung a haymaker. Saris ducked under the blow, the baton cracking against his kneecap with a sickening thwack. He went down screaming. She used his falling body as a ramp, vaulting over the next attacker. In midair, she spun, the baton lashing out to strike the temple of the quill-haired female. The girl dropped like a marionette with cut strings. Saris hit the ground and kept moving. There was no wasted energy, no screaming, no hesitation. Just the rhythmic crack-snap-thud of the baton finding nerve clusters, joints, and solar plexuses. She flowed through them like water through a grate. A massive ursine cadet tried to bear hug her. She drove the blunt end of the baton into his throat, then swept his legs. As he fell, she pirouetted, swinging the baton in a wide arc that caught two flanking attackers in the ribs, collapsing their lungs. 8 seconds. Krogan, recovered from the initial nerve strike, roared and charged her from behind, pulling a concealed combat knife. Saris didn't turn. She sensed the displacement of air. She dropped to her knees, letting Krogan stumble over her, and as he passed, she drove the baton upward into his groin, then whipped it back to smash into the base of his skull. Krogan hit the floor face first and did not move. 10 seconds. Saris stood up. She spun the baton once, a blur of black plastic, and snapped it back into its retracted form. She clipped it to her belt. Around her, 12 members of the Academy's elite lay groaning, unconscious, or curling into fetal balls. The silence that followed was deafening. Saris took a deep breath. The bioluminescence on her skin was flaring violently, a blinding white aura of pure adrenaline. She looked at her hands. They were steady. The doors to the dome hissed open. Academy security stormed in, stun rifles raised, expecting a riot. They skidded to a halt. They looked at the carnage. They looked at the lone, slender girl standing amidst the bodies of the most feared squad in the sector. "Secure the area," a sergeant yelled, his voice cracking with confusion. "Medics! We need medics for everyone!" Up on the gantry, Elias slowly let out the breath he had been holding. His heart was racing as if he had been the one fighting. He looked at the girl, no, the woman down below. She looked terrifying. She looked magnificent. "Holy hell," he whispered. The security footage had made 3 laps around the station's local net before the sensors could scrub it. By morning, every cadet, janitor, and cook on Vanguard Academy had seen it. In the command review room, High Admiral Holloway sat in a leather chair, watching the holographic replay for the 5th time. He was a man of few words, hardened by 50 years of naval warfare. Beside him, Commander Tyrell, the head of cadet training, leaned against the wall, shaking his head. On the screen, Saris Vane moved like a glitch in the video feed, a blur of violence that defied physics. "Slow it down to 25%, Holloway said. The hologram slowed. Now they could see the technique, the absolute economy of motion, the way she used the baton not just to strike, but to block, to leverage, to direct momentum. "Valoran Royal Guard training," Tyrell said, his voice grim. "Or something older. That's not self-defense, Admiral. That's an extermination protocol adapted for a non-lethal weapon." "She didn't break a single bone," Holloway noted. "Soft tissue damage only. Concussions, bruised egos, but no permanent disability. She showed restraint." "Restraint," Tyrell scoffed. She humiliated the premier squad of the compact in front of the entire student body. Politics is going to have a field day. Holloway paused the footage on the final frame. Saris standing over Krogan, glowing like a vengeful star. Armed with only a non-lethal baton, Holloway muttered, a note of incredulity creeping into his granite tone. She flattened 12 Predator cadets before anyone blinked. Tyrrell looked at the Admiral. That's going to stick, you know. That line. The cadets are already whispering it. Good, Holloway said. He leaned forward. The Predator program is getting soft, arrogant. They needed a wake-up call. I want her in your office. Tyrrell. Give her a formal reprimand for unauthorized combat. Make it sound severe. Then put her in the rehabilitation unit. With the humans, Tyrrell raised an eyebrow. And the rejects. Yes. Holloway smiled, a cold, sharp expression. Let's see if she can teach them how to bite back. Sarah stood at attention in the center of the office. She had been standing there for 20 minutes. She had expected expulsion. She had expected a cell. Instead, she had received a lecture on unit cohesion and appropriate escalation of force that felt strangely hollow. You are on thin ice, Cadet Vane, Commander Tyrrell said, shuffling a data pad. You embarrassed 12 potential assets of the compact fleet. Your mother has been notified. She sent a reply. Saris tensed. Sir? 2 words, Tyrrell said. Well done. Saris felt a chill go down her spine. Of course, her mother didn't care about the risk. She only cared that the weapon worked. Dismissed, Tyrrell said. And Vane? Watch your back. Squad Carax won't forget this. Neither will anyone else. Understood, sir. Saris turned and marched out. She kept her chin high, her stride perfect, until she reached the sanctuary of her quarters. The door hissed shut and locked. The lights automatically adjusted to a soothing Velaran twilight. Only then did the mask shatter. Saris collapsed onto her bunk, her legs giving way. She pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around herself. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably. She could still feel the impact of the baton. The crunch of cartilage. The intoxicating rush of power that had flooded her veins when she realized she was stronger than them. That was the terrifying part. Not the fear of defeat, but the joy of victory. The predator instincts she despised were not foreign invaders. They were part of her. She had enjoyed the violence. She had wanted to hurt them. No, she whispered into the dark room. I am not a monster. I am Saris. She looked at her hands, still trembling. She had won the fight, but she had lost her camouflage. She was no longer the invisible diplomat. She was a target, a legend, a threat. Elias Ward's face flashed in her mind, the human who had looked at her not with fear, but with a strange, crooked curiosity. She pushed the image away. Attachments were weaknesses. Friends were liabilities. She was in the belly of the beast now, and the only way to survive was to be colder, harder, and sharper than the teeth surrounding her. No friends, she vowed, her voice cracking. No romance. No vulnerabilities. She lay back in the darkness, the bioluminescent patterns on her skin pulsing slowly, fading into the gloom, while outside the station, the great eye of the gas giant stared unblinking into the void. The Academy network was not subtle. By the time the artificial sun cycle simulated morning, the footage of Saris Vane dismantling Squad Carax had mutated into 1,000 different forms of digital graffiti. On the mess hall screens, unauthorized loops played on repeat. One showed Saris with laser eyes superimposed over her face, vaporizing a cartoon version of Krogan. Another was a slow-motion analysis of her hip rotation during the final strike. captioned with a single word in bold. Red Basic, Terminator. There were vids that were admiring, treating her like a newfound deity of violence, and there were others that were vile, xenophobic diatribes warning that the Velaran witch was a threat to the purity of the compact. Saris walked through the central concourse, her spine stiff, her eyes fixed on the middle distance. The reaction of the student body was a physical wave of pressure. As she passed a group of heavy world cadets, they fell silent, pressing their backs against the bulkheads as if she radiated radiation. A few meters later, a young human cadet pointed a finger at her and whispered to his friend, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and hero worship. She was no longer Saris Vane, the diplomat. She was the anomaly, the girl with the baton. She hated it. Every stare felt like a targeting laser. Her mother's training screamed at her to blend in, to be the shadow in the room. But she had set herself on fire to survive the night, and now she had to walk through the ashes. Her datapad chimed with a priority transfer order. She had been reassigned. Unit designation, Rehabilitation and Integration Squad 4. Command, Commander Tyrell. Saris frowned. Rehabilitation. It sounded like a prison sentence. Elias Ward was already in the briefing room for Squad 4 and he was not happy about it. Rehabilitation, Elias said, leaning back in his chair and kicking his boots up onto the table. That is just a polite word for the garbage disposal. Get your feet off my table, Ward, a gravelly voice rasped from the doorway. Elias dropped his feet instantly. Commander Tyrell walked in. He was a Turian, a species with metallic carapace plating and mandibles that made their smiles look like threats. Tyrell was old for a field commander. Half his face was scarred silver from plasma burns. And he walked with the heavy, confident gait of a predator who had eaten everything that ever tried to kill him. This is not a garbage disposal, Tyrell said, stopping at the head of the room. This is a crucible. You are here because you are either too dangerous to be let loose or too damaged to be useful. My job is to fix you, or break you into smaller, more manageable pieces. The door hissed open again. Saris Vane stepped inside. The room, which contained Elias, a sullen Krogan nursing a broken nose, the same Krogan Saris had flattened the night before, and a twitchy, four-armed technician named Jax, went dead silent. Tyrell looked at Saris. You are late. Vane. I was detained by a security checkpoint, sir, Saris said, her voice cool and melodic. They wanted to scan my Baton for illegal modifications. And? They found none. They seemed disappointed. Tyrell made a sound that might have been a laugh or a cough. Sit down, next to Ward. Saris moved to the empty chair beside Elias. She moved with that same terrifying grace Elias had seen in the observation deck, a fluid lack of hesitation. Krogan, sitting on the other side of the table, actually flinched when she pulled out her chair. Elias looked at her. Up close, she was even more striking. She was even more. The bioluminescent patterns on her neck were pulsing a slow, steady azure. She smelled like ozone and crushed flowers. So, Elias said, leaning in slightly, pitching his voice low. You are the one everyone is talking about. The Baton legend. He stuck out his hand in a standard human greeting. Elias Ward. We met briefly. You told me I was lost. Saris looked at the hand. Then she looked at Elias's face. In Velaran culture, extending an open hand toward a stranger was a declaration of empty weapons, a ritualistic prelude to a duel to the death. It meant I have discarded my primary weapon so I can strangle you with my fingers. Her training overrode her common sense. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor, and dropped into a deep, formal combat crouch. Her hands swept back, her chin tucked, her eyes locking onto his throat. "I accept your challenge," she said, her voice devoid of irony. "Whoa!" Elias scrambled back, his chair toppling over as he nearly fell on his ass. "Whoa, easy, it is a handshake. It means hello, friendly, no strangling." The rest of the room erupted. Jax, the four-armed cadet, scrambled up the wall panels in panic. Krogan looked like he was about to dive under the table. Saris froze. She looked at Elias, who was holding his hands up in surrender, looking both terrified and bewildered. She looked at Terrell, who was watching the scene with unblinking amusement. Slowly, agonizingly, Saris straightened up. The blue light on her skin flared a humiliated violet. "I apologize," she said, smoothing her uniform. "Cultural mistranslation on Valera. That gesture implies imminent lethal intent." "Remind me never to wave at your mother," Elias muttered, righting his chair. His heart was hammering against his ribs. For a second there, he had been absolutely certain she was going to rip his trachea out. "Sit down," Terrell ordered, though the mandibles were twitching with suppressed humor. "This is exactly why you are here. You are a mess of conflicting instincts and bad habits. Ward, you are insubordinate. Vain, you are a hair-trigger weapon with social anxiety. Krogan, you got beaten up by a diplomat. We are going to fix this. We are going to unlearn predation." "Unlearn predation?" Krogan grunted, touching his bandaged nose. "That is what we were bred for. That is what you were sold for." Tyrell corrected sharply. "There is a difference between a soldier and a monster. A soldier controls the violence. A monster is controlled by it. Right now, looking at this table, I see a lot of monsters. By the time I am done with you, you will be soldiers, or you will be dead. Now, get to the gym. We are sparring." The gym was a high-gravity environment, the air thick and heavy. The mats were hard polymer, unforgiving to bone and skin. "Pair up," Terrell barked, walking the perimeter with a shock stick in his hand. "Krogan, you take Jax. Try not to eat him. Ward, you are with Vane." Elias groaned. "Sir, with all due respect, I like my limbs attached to my body. Can I fight the giant lizard instead?" "Scared, Ward?" Terrell asked. "Terrified, actually. Have you seen what she does to people?" "Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Vane, try not to hospitalize him. We need him for the budget report." Saris stepped onto the mat. She looked calm, almost bored. She adjusted the cuffs of her training gear, her movements precise. "I will not injure you permanently," she said to Elias. "I have studied human physiology. I know how much force your bones can withstand before structural failure." "That is oddly comforting," Elias said, bouncing on the balls of his feet, trying to shake out the tension. "Okay, let's dance." He expected her to attack instantly. She didn't. She waited. She stood perfectly still, her weight evenly distributed, watching him. It was unnerving. Elias feinted a left jab. She didn't blink. He tried a low kick to test her reach. She simply stepped back 1 inch, letting his foot sail harmlessly through the air. "You are telegraphing," she said. "Your shoulder drops before you strike." "Thanks for the tip," Elias gritted out. He lunged, committing to a grapple, trying to use his weight advantage. Saris pivoted. It was like trying to grab smoke. She caught his wrist, used his own momentum, and flung him over her hip. Elias hit the mat hard, the air leaving his lungs in a wheeze. "Get up!" Tyrell yelled. Elias scrambled up. He was a frontier brawler, not a martial artist. He had learned to fight in mud pits and colony bars. He couldn't beat her on technique. He had to cheat. He circled her again. This time, as he lunged, he spat on the floor in front of her. Saris glanced down, a microsecond of disgust and confusion. That was all he needed. Elias dropped his shoulder, but instead of striking, he dove for her legs, tackling her below her center of gravity. They went down in a tangle of limbs. Saris hissed, a sharp, alien sound. She tried to leverage him off, but Elias used his dead weight, wrapping his legs around hers, pinning her arm against her side. For a glorious, fleeting second, he had her pinned. "Gotcha!" he panted, his face inches from hers. His hand was pressed flat against her ribcage to hold her down. Beneath the thin fabric of her training suit, he felt the intense heat of her skin. His fingers were splayed over the bioluminescent markings that ran along her side. The reaction was instantaneous. Saris gasped, her eyes widening. The contact sent a shockwave through her nervous system that had nothing to do with combat. It was a biologically engineered response, a Veleran reflex where touch on those specific luminescent nodes triggered a cascade of dopamine and oxytocin, a bonding response usually reserved for mating or deep pack integration. It was pleasure. It was vulnerability. It was terror. Her eyes flashed a brilliant, blinding white. The predator instinct roared in panic at being touched so intimately. "No!" she cried out. She didn't use technique this time. She used raw, hysterical strength. She bridged her hips, throwing Elias off her as if he weighed nothing. She reversed the position in a blur, slamming him onto his back. She straddled his chest, her forearm pressed against his throat, pinning him to the mat. They froze. Saris was breathing hard, her chest heaving. Her skin was glowing so brightly it illuminated Elias's face in a ghostly azure wash. She was looking down at him, her pupils blown wide, her lips parted. Elias stared up at her. He could feel the weight of her hips on his, the heat radiating from her, the tremble in the arm that was crushing his windpipe. He should have been fighting for air, but his brain had short-circuited. The air between them crackled. It wasn't just adrenaline. It was a raw, jagged line of sexual tension that was thick enough to choke on. He saw the confusion in her eyes, the war between the predator that wanted to kill him and something else, something softer and more desperate that wanted to stay right where she was. "Vane!" Tyrrell's voice cut through the haze like a whip. "Release him. He tapped out 3 seconds ago." Saris blinked. She looked at her arm on Elias's throat. She looked at his face. She scrambled off him, backing away until she hit the wall of the gym. She looked at her hands. The glow was fading, but her skin still felt like it was burning where he had touched her. "I apologize. I lost control." Elias sat up, rubbing his throat. He coughed, trying to get air back into his lungs. He looked at her, across the mat. He wasn't angry. He was reeling. "You okay?" he rasped. Saris didn't answer. She turned and walked out of the gym without asking for permission. "Interesting," Tyrell murmured, writing something on his datapad. "Ward, stop gawking and give me 20 laps. You telegraph your tackles too." That night, Saris sat in the dark of her quarters, the only light coming from the holographic interface of her terminal. She could still feel his hand on her ribs. It was a phantom sensation, burning through the layers of her discipline. She hated it. She hated that a clumsy, insubordinate human could short-circuit years of mental conditioning with a single touch. "Focus," she commanded herself. "You are an inspector. Do your job." She initiated the diplomatic override protocols. Her mother's codes were powerful, slicing through the Academy's firewalls like a monofilament blade through silk. She bypassed the student records, the supply manifests, and dug into the restricted tactical logs. She was looking for anomalies. She found nightmares. The files were heavily redacted, black blocks of censorship covering names and dates. But the keywords remained. Subject: neural conditioning efficacy. Test group: predator cadets. Cycles 4 through 9. Objective: suppression of empathy. Enhancement of lethal compliance. She scrolled faster, her eyes scanning the data streams. Then she stopped. Deployment scenario Gamma. Frontier pacification. Target region: the Outer Rim, Cestus sector. Saris went cold. Cestus. That was Elias's home. She had seen it in his file. She opened the sub-file. It detailed a plan to use reconditioned predator units to quell unrest in the frontier colonies. But the language wasn't about peacekeeping. It was about subjugation, total compliance enforcement, elimination of dissent leaders, asset denial. They were going to turn the students into death squads and unleash them on their own people. And there was something else. A recurring error log attached to the simulation servers. Anomaly detected in SimDeck 4. Override by user, Voron. Someone was tampering with the training parameters. Someone high up. Saris closed the connection, her heart pounding. She looked at her hand, the one that had held the baton. The academy wasn't just a school. It was a factory. And she and Elias were just raw materials waiting to be processed. She is a goddess, the insectoid cadet chattered, polishing his boots in the communal locker room. A terrifying, glowing goddess of destruction. Did you see how she threw you? It was poetry. Elias was sitting on the bench, staring at the floor. Yeah, poetry. Violent, suffocating poetry. You like her. The insectoid clicked its mandibles in a teasing rhythm. I do not like her, Elias snapped, looking up. She tried to strangle me, twice. In 24 hours. That is not a basis for a relationship. That is a cry for a restraining order. But you stared at her, the insectoid persisted. When she pinned you, your heart rate monitor spiked to 180. I checked the logs. You hacked my medical monitor? I was curious. Elias put his head in his hands. She's complicated. She looks at me like I'm a puzzle she can't solve, or a bug she wants to step on. I can't tell which. He thought about the moment on the mat, the heat, the look in her eyes. It hadn't just been anger. He knew what anger looked like. That had been recognition. For a split second, the Ice Queen had melted, and he had seen someone just as scared and lonely as he was. She is Veleran, the insectoid warned. They eat their mates, you know. That's praying mantises, Elias said. Velerans just clinically dissect them emotionally until they wither away. Same result. The insectoid shrugged. Simulation start in T-10 seconds. The automated voice echoed through the staging area. Saris and Elias stood side by side, checking their weapons. They were pulse rifles, set to stun simulation mode. Ready? Elias asked. He didn't look at her. The awkwardness from the gym hung between them like a force field. I am always ready, Saris said stiffly. We are to lead the squad through the breach, secure the hostages and extract. Standard protocol. Right, standard. Just, if I get pinned again, try not to bruise my trachea this time. Saris glanced at him. A tiny, almost imperceptible crack appeared in her stoic mask. Do not touch my ribs, and your trachea will remain intact. Deal. The doors hissed open. They moved into the simulation. It was a mock-up of a civilian transport ship. The corridors were smoky, lit by strobing red emergency lights. Squad on me, Elias ordered into his comms. Jax, take point, Vane, rear guard. They moved efficiently. The first wave of enemy combatants, holographic drones, appeared around the corner. Elias dropped 2 with precision shots. Saris dismantled a third that got too close, using the stock of her rifle with brutal efficiency. "Clear," Elias called. "Moving to the bridge." They reached the blast doors. Elias started the hacking minigame on the panel. "Doors jammed," he muttered. "This isn't right. The code is cycling too fast." Suddenly, the lights in the corridor shifted from red to a blinding, harsh white. The air temperature dropped 10 degrees instantly. "System anomaly," Saris said, looking at her wrist comp. "Safety protocols are disengaging." "What?" Elias spun around. From the vents, new drones dropped. But these weren't the standard holographic projections. These were heavy combat models, clad in real plasteel armor. Their weapon emitters glowed a lethal violet instead of the training yellow. "Cover!" Saris screamed. She tackled Elias just as a plasma bolt scorched the air where his head had been. The heat was real. The smell of ozone was real. "That's live fire!" Elias yelled, scrambling behind a crate. "Command! Abort! Abort simulation!" Static filled his earpiece. "They are jamming us," Saris said, firing back. Her shot hit a drone, but instead of vanishing, the drone staggered and kept coming. "Damage settings are at 100%. This is not a glitch." "Who the hell turns a training sim into a firing squad?" Elias shouted, popping up to fire a burst. "The same people who wrote the logs," Saris whispered to herself. She looked at the pattern of the drones. They were flanking using advanced suppression tactics. This wasn't a lesson. It was a stress test. "We have to move," Saris said. "They will box us in. We need to breach the bridge manually." "Manually? That is a blast door." "You are an engineer, aren't you? Improvise." Elias looked at the door, then at the power conduit running along the ceiling. "Cover me." He bolted from cover. The drone swiveled to track him. Saris stood up, fully exposed, and unleashed a barrage of fire. She wasn't just shooting. She was conducting a symphony of suppression. She drew every ounce of fire onto herself, her shield flaring as bolts hammered her position. Elias slid under the door controls, ripped the panel off, and yanked the power coupling. He jammed the live wire into the locking mechanism. Sparks showered him. The door groaned and slid open halfway. "Inside! Go!" Elias screamed. Saris sprinted, diving through the gap. Elias followed, rolling through just as the drones concentrated their fire on the doorway. They slammed the manual seal shut. Silence. They were in the bridge. It was empty. The simulation ended abruptly, the mission complete text flashing in the air, mocking them. Elias slumped against the wall, sliding down to the floor. His uniform was singed. He was bleeding from a cut on his cheek where a piece of shrapnel had grazed him. "Real blood," he said, touching the wound. He looked at his finger. "They tried to kill us." "They tried to see if we would break," Saris said. She was standing, but she was leaning heavily on her rifle. Her skin was gray, drained of color. "It was a behavior test, extreme duress, to see if the rehabilitation was working." "That's not a test. That's attempted murder." Elias pushed himself up, his anger igniting. "I'm going to Tyrell. I'm going to the Admiral." "No," Saris said. "You cannot. Watch me." "Elias," she grabbed his arm. "If you go to them, you disappear." The orders came from the top. I saw the logs. They were standing in the maintenance corridor behind the sim deck now, the cool air of reality hitting their sweaty skin. Elias ripped his arm away. "You saw the logs. When?" "Last night, I hacked the secure archive." "And you didn't tell me? You let us walk into a kill box?" "I didn't know it would be today," Saris shouted back, her composure finally shattering. "I am trying to figure out the pattern. I am trying to survive just like you." You're not like me. Elias stepped closer, his voice shaking with rage. You're Veleran. You're royalty. You're part of the system that built this place. I'm just the meat they feed into the grinder. Did you know they were targeting the frontier, my home? Yes, Saris admitted, her voice dropping. I saw it. And you still follow orders? I have no choice. Saris slammed her hand against the metal wall, the sound echoing down the empty corridor. Do you think I want this? Do you think I want to be a weapon? My mother sent me here to ensure I became useful. If I fail, I don't just get expelled. Elias, I get erased. I am a hostage to my own bloodline. She was breathing hard, tears of frustration gathering in her violet eyes. The mask was gone. The diplomat was gone. There was only a terrified girl standing in front of him. Elias stared at her, the anger drained out of him, replaced by a sudden, aching realization. She wasn't the enemy. She was in the cell right next to his. Saris, he said softly. The shift in his tone caught her off guard. She looked up. They were standing inches apart in the flickering light of the emergency strip. The smell of ozone and sweat was thick in the air. He could feel the heat radiating from her again, that strange, captivating Valeran warmth. We are both expendable to them, Elias said. You know that, right? Yes, she whispered. He reached out, slowly this time, giving her every chance to break his arm. He cupped her face. His thumb brushed the high arch of her cheekbone. She didn't pull away. Her breath hitched. Her eyes searched his, looking for the trap, looking for the trick. But there was no trick. Just a human man looking at her as if she were the only real thing in the universe. The distance between them vanished. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was gravity. They leaned in. Saris's eyelids fluttered shut. Her lips parted, anticipating the contact. She wanted it. God, she wanted it more than she wanted to breathe. She wanted to be held, to be known, to be something other than a sharp instrument. Elias tilted his head. His breath ghosted over her lips. No vulnerabilities. The mantra screamed in her mind, if you love him, they will use him to break you. Saris gasped and shoved him back. It wasn't a strike. It was a desperate push. She stumbled backward, her eyes wide with horror at what she had almost done. I can't, she choked out. I can't do this. Elias stood there, his hands still suspended in the air where her face had been. He looked hurt, but he didn't move to stop her. Saris, stay away from me, Elias, she said, her voice trembling. If you want to live, stay away from me. She turned and ran down the corridor, her boots echoing on the metal grating. Elias watched her go. He lowered his hand, his fist clenching at his side. He felt a fierce, burning mixture of longing and fury. Anger at the academy for twisting them, anger at Saris for running, and a terrifying, absolute certainty that he was already in too deep to ever turn back. He touched his cheek where the shrapnel had cut him. The blood was drying. We'll see about that, he whispered to the empty hallway. He turned and walked the other way, his mind racing not with fear but with a plan. They wanted to test him. Fine. He was going to show them what happened when the lab rats started biting the scientists. The transport shuttle rattled like a tin can full of ball bearings as it navigated the debris field. Outside the reinforced viewports, the carcass of the iron lung loomed out of the cosmic dust. It was a decommissioned heavy cruiser, a relic from the Unification Wars, its hull pitted by micrometeoroids and twisted by ancient explosions. It looked dead. It looked like a tomb. Commander Terrell stood at the head of the troop bay, holding onto a strap with one clawed hand. The other hand held a data pad that glowed with a pale green light. Listen up, Tyrrell barked, his voice cutting through the mechanical groan of the engines. Intelligence suggests scavengers have been picking at this carcass. Your mission is simple: board, sweep, clear. This is a low-risk environment. Standard tactical formation. Do not shoot unless you have a positive target identification. I do not want the paperwork for a friendly fire incident in zero gravity. Elias Ward checked the charge on his pulse rifle for the third time. He was sitting across from Sarah's Vane. She was staring at the floor, her face a mask of impenetrable calm. Since the incident in the corridor, the almost kiss, the desperate retreat, she had built a wall of ice between them so thick Elias wasn't sure he could chip through it with a plasma cutter. Low risk, Elias muttered to the cadet next to him, a nervous reptilian boy named Crix. That is officer speak for we have no idea what is down there, so try not to die immediately. You are not helping, Crix hissed, his tail twitching anxiously. The shuttle docked with a metallic screech that vibrated through the hull. The airlock cycled, the light turning from angry red to permissive green. Move out, Tyrell ordered. Squad 4, you have the lower engineering deck. Watch your oxygen levels. Sarah stood up. She didn't look at Elias. She simply hefted her rifle, checked the baton clipped to her belt, and moved into the airlock with that unnerving silent grace. Elias followed, swallowing the knot of tension in his throat. The interior of the iron lung was cold. The air scrubbers had failed decades ago, leaving the atmosphere stale and tasting of recycled dust. Emergency power was running on a backup loop, casting long, flickering shadows that danced against the bulkheads like nervous ghosts. Creepy, Elias whispered, his voice echoing too loudly in his helmet comms. This place has serious haunted house energy. If a ghost pops out, I am hiding behind the big lizard. He gestured to Jax, the massive predator cadet from Squad Carax who had been assigned to their unit. Jax grunted, his 4 eyes narrowing in the gloom. Ectoplasmic entities are statistically improbable in a vacuum environment, Sarah said over the comms. Her voice was crisp, professional, and completely devoid of humor. Your fear of non-existent spirits is irrational. Ward, it is a joke, Vane. Elias sighed, scanning a dark corridor with his weapon light. It is a coping mechanism. You should try it sometime. Might help with the whole Terminator vibe you have going on. My vibe keeps me alive, she countered. Your jokes just waste oxygen. Contact front, Jax roared. The squad dropped into cover as a shape flitted across the far end of the hallway. It wasn't a scavenger. It moved too fast, too mechanically. Drone, Saris identified instantly. Class 4 sentry, that shouldn't be here. This ship has been dead for 50 years. The drone hovered in the shadows, a single red eye scanning them. It wasn't attacking. It was watching. Command, Elias keyed his mic. We have active automated defenses requesting orders. Static. Command, Elias tried again. Tyrell, do you copy? Nothing but white noise. Jamming signal, Sarah said, looking at her wrist comp. Broad spectrum, coming from inside the ship. Suddenly, the deck plates beneath them groaned. A deep, resonant boom shuddered through the ship's frame, like a dying whale exhaling. The artificial gravity fluctuated, lurching them sideways. Structural failure, Crix screamed. Behind them, a blast door slammed shut with the force of a guillotine, severing them from the airlock. Sparks showered down as the locking mechanism fused. We are cut off, Jax growled, throwing his shoulder against the door. It didn't budge. That was not an accident. Those were explosive bolts. Saris moved to the door panel, ripping off the cover. Hardline is dead. We are isolated. Elias looked around at their small group. Him, Saris, Jax, and 2 terrified junior cadets. They were trapped in a tin can with active defenses and no way out. "Okay," Elias said, forcing his voice to remain steady. "New mission. Find the jammer, kill it, call for a ride, stay sharp. The ghosts might be real after all." They moved deeper into the engineering deck. The ship wasn't just derelict, it had been repurposed. Cables that looked brand new snaked along the rusted floors, pulsing with data. "This is not a scavenger operation," Saris whispered. She ran a hand over a server bank that had been hastily bolted to a bulkhead. "This is a secure facility." "Secure facility for what?" Elias asked. "Let's ask the computer." Saris pulled a data spike from her belt and jammed it into the server port. Her eyes glazed over slightly as her Velaran implant interfaced with the machine. "You can talk to it?" Jax asked, watching her with suspicion. "I can persuade it," Saris murmured. Her fingers danced in the air, manipulating holographic interfaces only she could see. Then, her face went pale. The bioluminescent markings on her neck flared a distressed white. "What is it?" Elias stepped closer. "Saris? It is us," she whispered. She projected the data onto the wall. A holographic map of the frontier sectors appeared. Elias's home. Red markers dotted the star systems. "Operation Silent Night," Saris read, her voice trembling. "Objective: total pacification of unrest in the Outer Rim. Method: deployment of conditioned predator units." "Conditioned?" Jax rumbled, stepping forward. "Neural override." Saris pointed to a stream of medical data. "They are not training us to be soldiers. They are installing backdoors in our minds. Subliminal command triggers. When the code word is broadcast, we stop thinking. We just kill. No mercy, no hesitation, no memory of the act afterwards." Elias felt the blood drain from his face. He stared at the map. He saw the coordinates for his home colony. "They are going to use us to slaughter them," Elias said. His voice was quiet, dangerous. "My people, my family. I came here to stop being a butcher. I came here to learn how to do it right, and they are just turning me into a smarter weapon." He slammed his fist into the bulkhead. The sound rang like a gunshot. "It is a lie!" Elias shouted, turning to Saris. "The whole academy, the honor, the discipline. It is all just paint over a slaughterhouse." "Elias," Saris reached out, but he pulled away. "Don't," he snapped. "Don't tell me to be calm. You saw the files. You saw what they are doing." "I did," Saris said, "and I see my mother's signature on the funding authorization." The admission hung in the air like poison gas. Elias stopped. He looked at her. She wasn't looking at him with the cold detachment of a diplomat anymore. She looked shattered. "We are both pawns, Elias," she said softly. "My people provide the funding. Your people provide the targets. The compact provides the lies." Jax let out a low, rumbling growl. "I have missing time." They turned to the massive predator. Jax was rubbing his temples. "Sometimes," Jax said slowly, "after a simulation, I wake up in the medbay. They say it was exhaustion, but I do not remember the mission. I do not remember anything. The blank spots." Saris nodded. "They are testing the triggers." "So we are lab rats," Elias said, his hands shaking with rage. "Fine, then let's be the kind of rats that carry the plague." Before they could formulate a plan, the corridor lights turned a violent crimson. "Intruder alert," a mechanical voice droned. "Sanitization protocol initiated." "They know we are in the system," Saris said, yanking her data spike free. "Run!" Panels in the ceiling slid open. Turrets dropped down. Drones poured from the ventilation shafts, their eyes glowing with lethal intent. Cover fire! Jax roared, stepping in front of the junior cadets. He unleashed a roar of plasma fire from his heavy cannon, shredding the first wave of drones. Move! Move! Elias grabbed Saris's arm, pulling her toward a maintenance hatch. The corridor dissolved into chaos. Plasma bolts scorched the air, melting metal and slagging the ancient hull. Elias fired blindly behind him, the recoil of his rifle jarring his shoulder. They are hurting us! Saris shouted over the noise, toward the aft airlock. Better than dying here. They sprinted through a maze of pipes and conduits. Saris was a blur. She didn't just run, she anticipated. She would slide under a pipe a split second before a laser sliced through the space where her head had been. She vaulted over debris, firing accurate, single shots that disabled drone sensors. Elias wasn't as graceful, but he was effective. He used his environment. He shot a steam pipe, blinding a cluster of drones with superheated vapor. He kicked a grate loose, sending a pursuing turret crashing into the lower deck. They were in sync. It wasn't spoken. It was felt. When Saris moved left, Elias covered right. When he stopped to reload, she laid down suppressive fire. They were a single organism, fighting for survival. They reached a narrow junction. A heavy blast door was closing ahead of them. Slide! Elias yelled. They dove, skidding across the metal floor, clearing the closing door with inches to spare. Jax and the others were right behind them. But as Elias scrambled to his feet, a hidden panel in the floor opened. A suppression drone rose up, point-blank range. It charged its main cannon. Elias! Saris screamed. She threw her baton. It wasn't a weapon, it was a projectile. It struck the drone's optical sensor, shattering the glass. The drone flinched, its aim thrown off. The cannon fired. The blast missed Elias's chest but hit the bulkhead beside him. The ancient metal, stressed by vacuum and age, shattered. Hull breach detected. The air screamed as it was ripped from the corridor. Elias was lifted off his feet. The decompression was a giant hand, dragging him toward the ragged hole in the side of the ship. Outside, the uncaring stars spun dizzyingly. Grab something! Jax bellowed, anchoring himself with his claws. Elias clawed at the floor, but the smooth metal offered no purchase. He was sliding. 10 feet. 5 feet. The cold of the void clawed at his boots. A hand caught his wrist. It was Saris. She was lying flat on the deck, her other hand gripping her baton. She had jammed the baton into a grate in the floor, turning it into an anchor. I have you! She screamed, her voice thin in the thinning atmosphere. The force of the suction was immense. Elias dangled over the edge of the breach, his legs kicking in the vacuum. He looked up at her. Her face was contorted with effort, her teeth bared. The bioluminescence on her skin was flaring blindingly bright, burning through her uniform. Let go! Elias yelled, his voice barely audible over his comms. You are going to get pulled out too. No! Saris shouted back. I am not losing you. She pulled. It was impossible strength. It was the hysterical strength of a mother lifting a car, or a lover refusing to let go of the edge of a cliff. She dragged him back, inch by agonizing inch, until his hand could grab the grate. They scrambled away from the breach, tumbling through the emergency airlock just as the automatic containment field slammed into place, sealing the hole. Silence returned. They were in a small emergency supply closet. The air was thick and stale, but it was there. Elias collapsed against the wall, sliding down until he hit the floor. He was gasping for breath, his chest heaving. His hands were shaking so hard he couldn't unclench them from fists. Saris was opposite him. She looked just as wrecked. Her hair was a mess, her uniform torn at the shoulder. You, Elias coughed. You are insane. You know that. You are absolutely insane. Statistically, Saris wheezed. Letting you die would have reduced the combat effectiveness of the squad by 20%. It was a tactical decision. Tactical, Elias laughed, a broken, hysterical sound. Right. He looked at his hands. They wouldn't stop shaking. The adrenaline crash was hitting him like a hammer. He felt cold, so cold. The void had touched him. Sarah saw it. She saw the tremor. She crawled across the small space. She didn't hesitate this time. She didn't think about protocols or mothers or missions. She reached out and placed her hand on the side of his neck, right over his pulse point. Her skin was hot, feverishly hot. The bioluminescent patterns were pulsing in a slow, soothing rhythm, a soft blue light that filled the dark closet. Elias froze. Saris? Shh, she whispered. It is a pack reflex, on Valera. When a hunt member is shocked, we ground them, we share the heat. It stabilizes the nervous system. Oh, Elias breathed. He leaned into her touch. He couldn't help it. It was the only warm thing in a universe of cold metal. He closed his eyes. He could feel her pulse beating against his skin, syncing with his own. I have never chosen anything, Sarah said quietly. Her voice was small in the darkness. My mother chose my genetic splice. She chose my education. She chose my mission. She chose my name. I am a construct, Elias. I am a weapon made of meat and politics. She looked at him, her violet eyes wide and wet. When I held you, by the breach, that was the first time I chose something. Just for me. Not for the mission. Not for Valera. For me. Elias opened his eyes. He reached up and covered her hand with his own. I was a hero once, he said, his voice raspy. For about 5 minutes, I refused the order to fire on that village. I thought I was saving them. But the other squad, the one behind me, they fired anyway. I didn't save anyone. I just ruined my career and watched them die. He looked at her. I thought coming here would fix me. I thought if I learned to be stronger, I could stop it from happening again. But it is just the same war. Saris, it is always the same war. Then we fight a different way, she whispered. They were close now. So close. The air between them was charged, heavy with the scent of ozone and their own sweat. The fear of death was still humming in their blood, but it was transmuting into something else, a desperate need to affirm life, to prove that they were still here, still feeling. Elias looked at her lips. He looked at the alien glow of her skin. He looked at the woman who had pulled him out of the void. Saris, he said. It was a question. Yes, she breathed. He leaned in. It wasn't like the movies, it wasn't smooth. Their noses bumped. His hand was trembling against her cheek. When their lips met, it was hesitant. It was terrified. It was the taste of copper and salt. Then, the dam broke. Saris made a sound in the back of her throat, a soft, desperate whimper. She grabbed the front of his uniform and pulled him closer. Elias wrapped his arms around her, burying his hands in her hair. The kiss deepened, becoming fierce, hungry. It was a collision of two lonely, broken people finding the matching jagged edges in each other. It was an act of rebellion. In a ship designed to kill them, in a system designed to control them. This was theirs. For a moment, there was no academy, no conspiracy, no predator conditioning, just the heat of her mouth, the scratch of his stubble, the desperate pounding rhythm of two hearts beating against the silence of space. They broke apart, gasping. Their foreheads rested against each other. Okay, Elias whispered. Okay. We cannot go back to how it was, Saris said, her voice fierce. We cannot pretend this didn't happen. I don't want to, Elias said, but if we go back there, if we expose this, we are declaring war on the entire compact. Good, Sarah said. Her eyes were hard now, the violet fire burning bright. I am tired of diplomacy. The door to the supply closet hissed. They pulled apart instantly, weapons raising. It was Jack's. The huge predator filled the doorway. He looked at Elias, he looked at Saris, he looked at the flushed skin and the heavy air between them. He grunted. The drones are regrouping, Jack said. And I found the data core, the one with the memory wipes. He held up a heavy crystalline drive. I remember now, Jack said. His voice was a low growl of pure fury. I remember what they made me do on Moon G4. I remember the children. He looked at Saris. You are going to tell the galaxy, aren't you? You are going to burn this place down. Yes, Saris said. We are? Then I am with you, Jack said. Squad Carax is not a weapon when we are hunters, and we choose our own prey. Then let's go hunting, Elias said, standing up. He offered a hand to Saris. She took it. Her grip was iron strong. We need to get to the extraction point, Saris said, the tactician taking over again, though her hand stayed in Elias's. We download the full drive. We survive the ambush, and then we go home and start a riot. Lead the way. Glow stick. Elias grinned. It was a real grin this time, a dangerous one. They moved out of the closet and back into the dark corridors of the Iron Lung. They were bruised, bleeding, and outnumbered. They were walking into a trap, but as Elias looked at Saris, moving with lethal grace beside him, and Jax, a mountain of vengeance bringing up the rear, he realized something. They weren't the victims anymore. They were the anomaly, and the Academy had no idea what was coming for it. The trek back to the shuttle was a running battle. The ship fought them every inch of the way. Doors locked, gravity fluctuated, but they adapted. When a door sealed, Jax ripped it off its hinges. When drones swarmed, Saris hacked their IFF tags, turning them on each other. When Elias's rifle jammed, he used the baton Saris tossed him to shatter a sensor array. They reached the airlock. The junior cadets were there, huddled and terrified. We are leaving, Elias announced. Everyone strap in. It is going to be a bumpy ride. As the shuttle detached and blasted away from the derelict, watching the Iron Lung recede into the darkness. Sarah sat next to Elias. She didn't look at him, but under the cover of the vibrating seats, her pinky finger hooked around his. Elias squeezed it. He looked at the data drive in his pocket. It was heavy. It contained the proof of 1,000 crimes. It was a death sentence. You okay? He whispered. No. Saris answered softly. I am terrified, but I am not alone. No, Elias said. You are not. The shuttle turned toward the gas giant, toward the spinning ring of Vanguard Academy. It looked peaceful from here, a shining beacon of order in the chaos. Liar, Elias whispered to the station. He closed his eyes and let the exhaustion take him. The warmth of Saris's finger, the only anchor keeping him from drifting away. The war had started, and for the first time in a long time, Elias Ward knew exactly which side he was on. The diplomatic terminal in Saris Vane's quarters was a sleek obelisk of obsidian glass, a direct line to the High Council of Valira. It was supposed to be the one uncompromised channel in a galaxy of surveillance, secured by quantum encryption that shifted every nanosecond. Saris stood before it, her hands trembling slightly. The data drive she had stolen from the Iron Lung burned a hole in her pocket. It contained everything: the casualty reports, the conditioning protocols, the kill orders for the frontier worlds. It was enough to topple the Academy's leadership. It was enough to start a war. Transmission initiating, she whispered, her fingers dancing over the haptic interface. Priority Alpha, eyes only, high matriarch. The upload bar filled with agonizing slowness. Saris watched the door, expecting security to burst in at any moment. She had encrypted the package inside a standard diplomatic status report, burying the horror under layers of banal court etiquette. 98%. 99%. The screen flashed green. Sent. Saris let out a breath she felt she had been holding since they escaped the derelict ship. It was done. Her mother would see the truth. Velera stood for order. Yes. But it also stood for the elegance of civilization. This butchery, this turning of children into mindless drones, was an affront to everything her culture claimed to value. The terminal chimed, a priority response. Saris frowned. That was too fast. The light lag alone should have meant a delay of 20 minutes. Unless the high matriarch was already watching. Unless she was already waiting. She opened the message. There was no video feed, no comforting voice, just text, scrolling in the sharp, angular script of the High Court. Receipt acknowledged. The data is consistent with known projections. Your initiative is noted but unauthorized. The Compact's internal stabilization methods are necessary for long-term regional security. Velera benefits from a pacified frontier. Saris read the words, but they refused to make sense. Known projections. Necessary. Then came the command, glowing in absolute, unarguable gold text. Stand down. Observe only. Do not intervene further. This is a direct order from the throne. It was signed with her mother's personal seal. Saris took a step back, hitting the edge of her desk. The room seemed to tilt. It wasn't just a rejection. It was a confirmation. Her mother knew. Velera knew. They weren't just tolerating the Predator program, they were banking on it. The pacification of the frontier, the slaughter of Elias's people, was the price Velera was willing to pay for a stable trade route. No, Saris whispered. The bioluminescence on her skin flickered and died, leaving her gray and ashen. We are not the civilized ones. We are just the ones who pay others to do the killing. Her faith in her own bloodline, in the moral superiority she had been raised to wear like armor, shattered into dust. She was not a diplomat. She was an accomplice. The tribunal chamber was a circular amphitheater of cold steel and harsh lighting. It was designed to make the accused feel small, like a specimen under a microscope. Saris, Elias, and the rest of the rehabilitation unit stood on a raised platform in the center. Around them, tiered benches were filled with academy brass, admirals, commanders, political attachés. Admiral Voron sat at the highest precipice, his face a mask of bored bureaucratic malice. The incident on the Iron Lung was a regrettable failure of cadet discipline, Voron intoned, his voice amplified by the room's acoustics. Instead of following standard reconnaissance protocols, the unit triggered dormant defense systems, destroyed valuable salvage, and endangered Academy assets. We were ambushed, Elias shouted, stepping forward. His uniform was still scorched from the firefight. The systems weren't dormant. They were active, and they were jamming us. Silence, Cadet Ward, Voron said, not even looking up from his datapad. Telemetry indicates the automated defenses were triggered by unauthorized hacking attempts, specifically by a Veleran interface spike. He gestured to the large holographic screen above them. And it seems this unit has a history of excessive volatility. The screen flickered to life. It was the footage from the training dome. The Baton incident. Saris watched herself on the screen. She saw the blur of motion, the precise, brutal efficiency with which she had dismantled Squad Karax. But the footage had been edited. The audio of Krogan's threats was gone. the sexual menace, the intimidation, all scrubbed. It just showed 12 cadets standing around, and then Saris exploding into violence like a deranged machine. A collective murmur went through the room. An officer near the front, a sharp-faced human with the insignia of internal affairs, stood up. He pointed at the screen. "Look at that," the officer said, his voice cold and loud. "That is not self-defense. That is a preemptive strike by a biological weapon." He turned to the tribunal, repeating the words that had become a whisper in the corridors, but now twisting them into an indictment. Armed with only a non-lethal baton, she flattened 12 predator cadets before anyone blinked. The officer let the sentence hang there. It wasn't a compliment anymore. It was proof that she was too dangerous to be free. "The court finds," Voron announced, banging a gavel that sounded like a gunshot, "that this unit is unstable. The cadets are to be remanded to their quarters pending a full psychological review. We will determine if they can be salvaged." Salvaged. Saris knew what that word meant in this place. It meant wiped. As guards moved in to surround them, Elias caught Saris's eye. He looked furious, desperate, but there was nothing they could do. They were being buried under a mountain of lies, and the shovel was being held by the very people they had tried to warn. Elias sat in a holding cell that smelled of antiseptic and hopelessness. The door slid open, but it wasn't a guard. It was Admiral Voron. The Admiral walked in with the casual air of a man who owned the building and everyone in it. He placed a small metal case on the table. "You are a problem, Ward," Voron said, sitting down. "You have a heroic streak. It is very inconvenient." "I try my best," Elias said, leaning back against the wall. "It is the insubordination that really sells it, though." Voron smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "We are accelerating the timeline. The frontier sectors have become unruly. They need a firm hand. The Predator fleets launch in 3 days. Elias went rigid. 3 days? You are launching an invasion in 3 days? A peacekeeping operation, Voron corrected smoothly. But peace requires enforcers. We need cadets who know the terrain. Cadets who are from the region. Cadets like you. He opened the metal case. Inside sat a small chrome implant. It looked like a seed made of nightmares. The neural regulator, Voron explained. It dampens the limbic system, removes fear, hesitation, guilt. It corrects the human error in the soldier. It makes you perfect. It makes you a drone, Elias spat. It makes you safe, Voron said. Here is the offer. Elias, you take the implant. You accept a commission as a lieutenant in the Predator Corps. We deploy you to the Cestus sector, your home. You can ensure the occupation is orderly. You can protect your family from the more enthusiastic units. Elias stared at the implant. And if I refuse, then you are expelled, Voron shrugged. Discharged dishonorably. You will be stuck on a transport ship back to Earth while the fleet burns your home sector to the ground. You will watch it on the news feeds, knowing you could have been there to stop the worst of it. It was a monstrous choice. Become a monster to save his family or stay human and let them die. You are sick, Elias whispered. I am efficient. Voron stood up, straightening his tunic. You have 12 hours to decide. Do not disappoint me. I would hate to waste a soldier with your potential. The door hissed shut, leaving Elias alone with the silence and the terrible weight of the offer. Saris was not in a cell. She was in her quarters, but the door was locked with a distinct red heavy security seal. The room darkened. The hollow projector in the center of the floor hummed to life. A figure materialized. It was tall, draped in shimmering robes of velour and silk. The High Matriarch, her mother, Saris, the hologram said. Her voice was the same one that had taught Saris to read, to fight, to lie. It was calm, melodic, and terrifying. Mother, Saris said. She didn't bow. She stood with her arms crossed, her back straight. You are making a mess, the matriarch said, drifting closer. The council is displeased. We sent you to ensure the weapon was stable, not to dismantle it. The weapon is pointed at innocence, Saris said. They are going to use the predators to subjugate the frontier. I saw the plans. You signed them. Historical necessity. The matriarch waved a hand dismissively. The compact is the shield that protects us from the void ravagers. If the compact crumbles, Valera burns. If the price of that shield is the freedom of a few backwater dirt farming worlds, it is a bargain we must take. It is evil, Saris said. It is power, the matriarch corrected sharply. You are thinking like a child. You are thinking about right and wrong. A ruler thinks only about survival and extinction. She looked at Saris with a gaze that dissected her. You have become attached to the human. The matriarch noted. The damaged one, Ward. Saris felt her heart spike, but she kept her face stone. He is my squad mate. He is a liability. He will be processed or discarded. Do not throw your life away for a fleeting biological urge. The matriarch's voice softened, becoming almost seductive. Stand down, daughter. Let the events play out. If you show loyalty now when I step down, the throne will be yours. You can change the galaxy then, but you have to survive today to rule tomorrow. It was the ultimate bribe, power, the future, the chance to fix things, later. All she had to do was let Elias and his world die now. Saris looked at the hologram. She looked at the woman who had engineered her DNA, who had crafted her into a perfect instrument. You taught me that a Veleran never strikes without a purpose, Saris said quietly. Yes, and you taught me that loyalty to the blood is the highest law. Yes, you were wrong, Saris said. The matriarch's eyes narrowed. Saris, the highest law is consent, Saris said, her voice rising. The highest law is protecting those who cannot protect themselves. You built a weapon, Mother, but you forgot one thing. Weapons do not have loyalties. They only have targets. She walked over to the terminal and smashed her hand onto the disconnect key. The hologram flickered and died, cutting off her mother's indignant shout. Saris stood in the silence. She had just committed treason. She had severed her tie to her world, her inheritance, her past. She was alone. No, she wasn't alone. She went to her closet and pulled out her training gear. She strapped the baton to her hip. She checked the charge. Jax, she whispered, tapping her comms, praying the internal frequency they had set up on the derelict was still active. Jax, can you hear me? A burst of static. Then a low, guttural growl. I hear you, little diplomat. Are you ready to be a hunter? I was born ready, Jax replied. Ward is in Sector 4 detention. I am moving to the conditioning hub. We need a distraction. Make it a big one, Saris said. The central conditioning hub of Vanguard Academy was a fortress of servers and cooling tanks. It was the brain of the beast. Jax did not sneak in. He walked to the main blast doors, ripped a heavy repeater cannon off a mounting bracket, and opened fire. The explosion shook the entire station. Alarms screamed. Security breach Sector 1. All units respond. In the chaos, the surveillance grid flickered and died. The cameras went blind. The electronic locks on the detention cells defaulted to emergency open. Elias was pacing his cell when the door hissed and unlocked. He didn't hesitate. He shoulder-checked the guard who was stumbling in confusion, grabbed the man's stun baton and sprinted into the corridor. He didn't run for the shuttles. He ran for Sector 7. He found Saris in the hallway outside her quarters. She had already incapacitated 2 security drones. They lay sparking on the deck plates. "You look terrible," Elias grinned, though he was breathless and sweating. "You look like a fugitive," Saris replied, falling into step beside him. "I prefer freedom fighter. It sounds better on the resume." "We need to get to the grav ring," Saris said. "We can lose them in the terrain. From there, we can access the command nexus from the maintenance underside." "The scenic route," Elias nodded. "Lead the way." They ran. Behind them, heavy boots thundered. Squads of loyalist predators were closing in. The grav ring was a marvel of engineering, a continuous strip of artificial landscape running the entire circumference of the station. It had forests, rivers, and mountains, all under a holographic sky. It was designed for survival training. Now, it was a hunting ground. Saris and Elias burst from the access hatch into a dense simulation of a temperate rainforest. The air was humid, smelling of pine and wet earth. It was jarringly organic after the steel and plastic of the station. "Into the trees," Elias ordered. They scrambled up a steep embankment, slipping on mossy rocks. Above them, search drones buzzed like angry hornets, scanning the canopy with thermal beams. "They are tracking our heat signatures," Saris panted, sliding behind the root system of a massive synthetic oak. "Mud," Elias said, dropping to his knees. "Cover exposed skin. It will mask the thermal reading. Old infantry trick." He scooped up handfuls of cold, wet mud and started smearing it on his arms and face. Saris hesitated for a fraction of a second, the diplomat recoiling from the filth, and then dove in. She covered her luminous markings, her neck, her face. They lay still in the undergrowth as a drone hovered 10 feet above them, its red laser sweeping the ground. It paused, whirred, and moved on. "Clear," Saris whispered. "Not for long," Elias said. "We need to keep moving." They moved deeper into the forest. The pursuit was relentless. They could hear the calls of the predator squads, hunting whistles and guttural barks. They were cornered in a narrow ravine. A waterfall, recycled water cascading over polymer rocks, blocked one end. A squad of 3 predators blocked the other. "Nowhere to run, traitor!" one of them shouted. Saris didn't speak. She moved. She used a tree branch as a fulcrum, swinging herself feet first into the chest of the lead predator. Elias laid down suppression fire with a stolen pistol. It was a frantic, breathless skirmish. Saris fought with a desperation she had never shown before. She wasn't fighting for points or pride. She was fighting for Elias. She took a glancing blow to the shoulder that spun her around, but she recovered instantly, sweeping the attacker's legs. They neutralized the squad, leaving them groaning in the mud. "Up the waterfall," Elias gasped, pulling Saris up. "There is a cave behind it. I saw it on the schematics." They scrambled through the freezing water, slipping and clawing their way into a small, secluded grotto behind the curtain of the falls. It was dark, loud with the roar of water, and hidden. They collapsed onto the stone floor, soaking wet, covered in mud, chests heaving. "Check your ammo," Elias wheezed. "Empty," Saris said, dropping the baton. Her hands were shaking. "I am empty." She looked at him. The mud on his face was streaked with water. His eyes were wild, dilated with adrenaline and fear. He looked at her, seeing the bruise forming on her shoulder, the way her hair was plastered to her skull. The tension that had been building since the gym, since the airlock, since the first moment they met, finally snapped. It wasn't a decision, but it was a collision. Elias reached for her, and she lunged for him. They slammed together, a tangle of wet fabric and desperate hands. This wasn't the tentative, gentle kiss in the closet. This was raw. This was the terrifying realization that they might be dead in an hour. "Saris," Elias groaned against her neck, his hands tangling in her wet hair, pulling her closer as if he could merge their bodies into one target. "Don't talk," Saris whispered, her voice fierce. She grabbed the collar of his tunic, pulling him down to her. They kissed with a hunger that bordered on pain. It was a reclaiming of their bodies. The Academy wanted to own them, to turn them into machines. Fine. They would prove they were flesh and blood. They would prove they could feel. They clung to each other in the dark, wet cave. Hands explored scars and bioluminescent ridges. The cold of the water and the heat of their skin created a sensory overload. Saris felt Elias's heartbeat against her chest, a frantic drum that matched her own. She traced the line of his jaw, the roughness of his skin, grounding herself in his humanity. Elias held her as if she were the only solid thing in a spinning universe. He kissed the hollow of her throat, the sensitive crest of her neck, murmuring things that were half prayer, half curse. The scene faded into the roar of the waterfall, a private, sacred moment of defiance, in the face of a system that demanded they be unfeeling monsters. Their intimacy was the most radical act of rebellion possible. An hour later, or maybe a minute, time had no meaning in the cave. They sat side by side, leaning against the rock wall. The adrenaline had faded, replaced by a steel-hard resolve. Saris was cleaning the mud from her baton. Elias was checking the charge on the stolen pistol. "They will expect us to keep running," Saris said. Her voice was steady again, but deeper, richer. "They will think we are trying to find a shuttle to escape. Admiral Voran thinks purely in terms of retreat or advance." Elias nodded. "He thinks we are scared." "I am scared," Saris admitted. She looked at Elias. "But I am done running." "Me too." Elias stood up. He offered her a hand. "My home is going to burn in 3 days if we don't stop this." Saris took his hand. She pulled herself up, standing toe-to-toe with him. She reached up and wiped a smudge of mud from his cheek. "Then we burn them first," she said. "The command nexus," Elias said. "It is in the center of the ring. If we can get in, we can plug the drive directly into the broadcast tower, bypass the sensors, show the whole galaxy what they are doing." "It is a suicide mission," Sarah said. "We are already dead." Elias smiled, that crooked, charming grin returning. "We are just too stubborn to lie down." Agreed. They checked their weapons one last time. They stepped through the waterfall, back into the artificial forest, back into the hunt. But they weren't the prey anymore. They stopped at a viewport on the upper level of the grav-ring structure. Below them, through the thick transparasteel, the gas giant churned. Massive bands of violet and ochre storms swirled in the crushing depths of the planet's atmosphere. It was chaotic, violent, and beautiful. Saris looked at the reflection of the two of them in the glass. A Velaran princess covered in mud and a human soldier with a stolen gun. "I cannot go back to Valera," she said quietly. "I committed treason today. My mother, she will not forgive this. I have no home." Elias stepped up beside her. He looked at the storms, then at her reflection. "I don't know if I have one either," he said. "If this goes wrong, Cestus is just a crater. If it goes right, I'm still a mutineer." He turned to her, taking her hand. His grip was warm, solid. "Home isn't a place on a map anymore, Saris," Elias said. "We burned the maps." "Then where is it?" she asked, looking up at him. Elias squeezed her hand. "Home might be wherever we decide to stop running and start building something better." Saris looked at him. She felt the ghost of his touch on her skin, the strength of him beside her. For the first time in her life, the future wasn't a path laid out by her mother or the academy. It was a blank slate. "Something better," she repeated. "I like the sound of that." "Come on," Elias said, turning away from the window. "Let's go start a revolution." They walked away from the view of the storm, heading toward the heart of the station, ready to scream the truth so loud that even the stars would hear it. The sub-level maintenance bay smelled of ozone and desperate improvisation. It was a tangled nest of conduit pipes and steam vents, a far cry from the polished marble of the academy's upper decks. But it was the only place the security scanners didn't look. "This is dignified," Jax grunted. The massive predator cadet was standing in the center of the cramped space. His terrifying, scarred combat armor was currently draped in loops of iridescent, ceremonial fabric. He looked like a tank trying to disguise itself as a parade float. "It is necessary camouflage," Sarah said, not looking up from where she was adjusting the hem of Elias's disguise. "The founding ceremony attracts dignitaries from 1,000 worlds. The corridors will be flooded with ceremonial guards, cultural attachés, and ritual dancers. Security algorithms look for combat silhouettes. They filter out the decorative." "I look like a fruit basket," Jax rumbled, twitching a clawed hand that was currently covered in a silk glove. "You look festive," Elias offered from where he stood stiffly on a crate. "And terrifying. A terrifying fruit basket." Elias was having his own wardrobe crisis. He was dressed in the stiff, high-collared robes of a Velaran High Court attendant, a disguise Saris had synthesized using the fabricator and stolen data files. The material was midnight blue and clung to him in ways that made him feel exposed, despite covering him from chin to boot. "Stop fidgeting," Saris commanded softly. She stepped between his knees, her hands moving to the complex fastenings at his throat. The space between them evaporated. "I can't breathe in this," Elias complained, though his breathlessness had very little to do with the collar. "Are you sure this is how it is supposed to fit? It feels tight." "It is Velaran formal wear," Saris murmured, her fingers deftly working the magnetic clasps. "It is designed to restrict movement. It forces posture. It forces control." She smoothed the fabric over his chest. Her hand lingered there for a fraction of a second too long, feeling the heavy thud of his heart beneath the silk. She looked up. Her violet eyes were wide, the bioluminescence on her neck pulsing a soft, traitorous pink. "You look," Sarah started, then cleared her throat, her diplomat's mask sliding back into place. "Passable. You look passable." Elias looked down at her. The smell of her, that ozone and orchid scent, filled his head. He could see the exhaustion bruising the skin under her eyes, the tension holding her shoulders rigid. "Hey," he whispered. He reached out, catching her hand before she could pull it away. He squeezed her fingers. "We are going to make it," he said. "We walk in. We plug the drive in. We burn the house down. Then we get drinks. Strong ones. Without umbrellas." Saris let out a breath that might have been a laugh if she wasn't so terrified. "I do not understand human metaphors, but I accept the terms." "All right," Jax growled, ripping a piece of lace off his shoulder pauldron. "Enough bonding. The ceremony starts in 10 minutes. If we are late, Voran starts his speech, and the galaxy believes the lie for another cycle." Cirrus stepped back, the moment breaking but the connection remaining, a taut wire of trust running between them. "Jax is right," she said, her voice turning crisp. "The plan relies on the distraction. Jax, you and the Coalition create a disturbance at the secondary airlocks. Draw the eyes of the system. Elias and I will take the maintenance shafts to the command nexus behind the Grand Hall. We have a 3-minute window before the redundant firewalls cycle. 3 minutes to save the soul of the compact. Elias adjusted his collar, wincing. No pressure. The Grand Hall of Vanguard Academy was a cathedral of glass and light, suspended over the churning storms of the gas giant below. It was large enough to hold 10,000 beings, and tonight it was full. Senators in floating gravity pods drifted above the crowd. Admirals in dress whites stood in phalanxes drinking sparkling nectar. The air buzzed with the hum of conversation in 100 languages, all translated into a dull roar of polite noise. At the head of the hall, a massive holographic stage dominated the room. Admiral Vorin stood there, a speck of white uniform against a backdrop of glory. Above him, sanitized footage played on loop. It showed Predator cadets, including Squad Carax, handing out rations to smiling colonists, rebuilding bridges, standing stoic guard over peaceful settlements. The music was swelling and orchestral. It was a masterpiece of propaganda. Peace, Vorin's amplified voice boomed, silencing the crowd. Peace is not a natural state. It is an architecture. It must be built. It must be maintained. And sometimes, it must be defended by those with the strength to do what others cannot. 50 meters below the stage, in a service shaft that smelled of grease and old coolant, Elias Ward was crawling on his stomach. "He lays it on thick, doesn't he?" Elias muttered into his comms. "Focus," Saris's voice came from behind him. "The junction box is 3 meters ahead. Do not touch the blue wires. They are live plasma conduits." "Right, no touching the death wires." "Got it." They reached the junction. It was a tight squeeze. Elias had to contort his body to reach the panel, his ceremonial robes bunching up around his knees. He popped the cover with a magnetic pry bar. "I need the code," Elias said, hooking his datapad into the port. "The encryption is Valyrian grade. He must have upgraded the lock." "Vorin is paranoid," Saris said. She squeezed into the space beside him. It was impossibly intimate, their bodies pressed together in the dark. Hot shaft, the roar of the ceremony vibrating through the metal walls. She reached over his shoulder. Her cheek brushed his ear. She began to type on his datapad, her fingers moving with blinding speed. "These are diplomatic overrides," she whispered. "My mother gave them to me to spy on the academy. Now I am using them to destroy it." "Irony," Elias grunted, watching the progress bar. "My favorite flavor." The light on the panel turned green. The heavy blast door leading to the Nexus antechamber hissed open. "We are in," Saris said. They scrambled out of the shaft and into the cool, sterile air of the command Nexus. It was a circular room filled with banks of servers, the humming heart of the Academy's network. In the center, a massive column of light represented the data stream being broadcast to the entire compact. The core server, Saris pointed to a black monolith near the console. "That is where the archives are physically stored." Elias ran to it, plugging in the stolen drive from the iron lung. "Interfacing. I am bypassing the read-only protocols, giving you root access. Now." Screens flared to life all around them. The sanitized holograms from the Grand Hall vanished, replaced by raw streams of data. Saris stepped forward, her eyes scanning the files. She wanted to look away, but she forced herself to bear witness. It was all there. Video logs of pacification missions where villages were burned to flush out insurgents. Medical files detailing the chemical lobotomies performed on difficult cadets. Trade agreements selling Predator units to corporate mining guilds as strikebreakers. "My God," Elias whispered, reading a casualty list. "This isn't peacekeeping. This is an extermination algorithm. Elias, Sarah said. Her voice sounded strange, hollow. He turned. Saris was staring at a document projected in the air. It was a funding authorization for the Neural Conditioning Initiative. At the bottom, glowing in the same gold script as the message she had received earlier, was the seal of the High Matriarch of Valera. She knew, Saris whispered. She didn't just know. She requested it, to ensure the reliability of Veleran investments in the Outer Rim. She staggered back, her legs giving way. The betrayal was physical. It was a knife in the gut. Her entire life, the lessons on honor, on the burden of civilization, on the moral imperative of Valera, it was all a lie to cover up a profit margin. Saris, Elias caught her before she hit the floor. He held her up, his arms wrapping around her waist. She was trembling violently, her skin cold, the bioluminescence dim and flickering like a dying bulb. "It is a lie," she gasped, clutching his robes. "I am a lie, my mother. She sold you, she sold all of us." "She is a politician," Elias said fiercely, holding her tight. "But you are not her. You hear me? You are not her." "I have her blood," Saris sobbed, a sound of pure heartbreak. "I have her codes, and you are using them to burn her down." Elias shook her gently. "Look at me. You are the one standing here. You are the one holding the match." Suddenly, the red alert klaxon screamed. The room was bathed in crimson light. "Intrusion detected," the mechanical voice blared. "I command Nexus locked down." The blast doors slammed shut. Heavy shutters descended over the viewing ports. "They found us," Elias said, pulling Saris to her feet. He raised his pistol, aiming it at the door. The main screen on the far wall flickered. The face of Admiral Voron appeared. He was not in the Grand Hall anymore. He was in a secure bunker, his face twisted in a sneer of disappointment. "Cadet Vane," Voron said. "And Ward. I should have known. You two are like a persistent infection." "It is over, Voron," Elias shouted. "We have the files. We are uploading them to the broadcast feed." "You are uploading nothing," Voron replied calmly. "I have severed the uplink. You are in a sealed box and security is cutting through the door as we speak. You have nowhere to go." Voron's eyes shifted to Saris. His expression softened into a facsimile of pity. "Saris, listen to me. I just spoke with your mother. She is distressed. She is willing to offer you a path out of this." Saris wiped her eyes. She stood up straighter. "I am done with her paths." "Are you?" Voron asked. "Think about the boy, Ward. If you release that data, he dies. The Compact will execute him for treason. He is a human mutineer. No one will weep for him." Elias stiffened. "But," Voron continued, his voice silky, "if you surrender the drive, if you step out of that room and denounce this hack as a radical terrorist plot, I can save him. You can save him." Saris froze. "I will appoint you as the liaison to the Predator Corps," Voron promised. "You can implement reforms. You can monitor the program from the inside. And Ward, I will assign him as your personal security detail. He will be safe. He will be alive. He will be yours." It was the perfect trap. It offered her everything she wanted: Elias's life, a chance to do good, a way to stop the immediate violence. All she had to do was swallow the lie. Saris looked at Elias. She saw the fear in his eyes. She saw the pulse beating in his neck. She loved him. By the stars. She loved him so much it hurt. To keep him safe. To keep him alive. Wasn't that worth a little silence? "Elias," she whispered. "No," Elias said. He stepped away from her. He lowered his gun, but not in surrender. In refusal. "Don't you dare," Elias said, his voice shaking. "Don't you dare take that deal." "He will kill you," Sarah said, her voice cracking. "They will execute you." "Then let them," Elias shouted. "I would rather be dead than be your pet. I would rather die standing on my feet than live on my knees, watching them lobotomize children and calling it peace." "I can protect you," Sarah pleaded, stepping toward him. "I can fix it from the inside." "That is what your mother said," Elias roared. "That is the poison, Sarah. Fix it from the inside. Just a little compromise. That is how you end up signing death warrants for profit." "You don't understand power," Sarah screamed back, the tears flowing freely now. "You don't understand the burden. You think it is just black and white, but it is not. It is survival. If I can save you, I will burn the rest of the galaxy to ash." "That makes you a monster," Elias yelled, stepping into her space, chest to chest. "If you burn the truth to save me, you destroy the man you are trying to save. I fell in love with the woman who pulled me out of the void. Saris, not a politician, not a coward." The word hung in the air. Coward. Sarah stared at him. She was trembling. She wanted to hit him, and she wanted to kiss him. She wanted to scream until her throat bled. But she looked into his eyes, those dark, human eyes that saw right through her masks. And she saw the truth. He meant it. He would hate her if she did this. And worse, she would hate herself. "You are an idiot," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You are a stubborn, suicidal idiot." "I know," Elias said softly. "I'm human." Saris closed her eyes. She took a deep breath. She felt the ghost of her mother's training, the cold, calculating logic, and she let it go. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the small, ornate, diplomatic emergency beacon. It was her lifeline, her connection to the throne. She dropped it on the floor. With a sharp crack, she brought her heel down on it. The device shattered into sparking components. "Goodbye, Mother," she whispered. She looked up at the screen, at Voron's stunned face. "No deal," Sarah said. Her voice was ice and iron. "We are not reformable, and we are not for sale." Voron's face twisted into a mask of pure fury. "Kill them, breach the room, and kill them both." The screen went black. "Okay." Elias exhaled, raising his pistol again. That was dramatic. "I hate you," Sarah said, grabbing her baton from her belt. "No, you don't." "I do. A little bit." Boom! The blast door buckled. Sparks showered the room. They were cutting through. "We need to reroute the broadcast manually," Sarah said, running to the console. Voron locked the software uplink. "We need to physically bridge the connection to the transmitter array." "I can hotwire it," Elias said, sliding under the console, ripping out panels. "But I need time." Boom! The door groaned. A laser cutter tip melted through the steel, glowing orange. "You have 30 seconds, Sarah said, extending her baton. "I will hold the door." The door exploded inward. Smoke filled the room. Security troopers poured in, armored in heavy riot gear, but they weren't alone. Behind them were Predator cadets, loyalists with blank eyes and leveled weapons. "Fire!" a captain screamed. Saris moved. She kicked a heavy server rack, toppling it over to create a barricade. Plasma bolts chewed into the metal. "Elias!" she shouted. "Now would be good." "Working on it!" Elias yelled from under the desk. "The coupling is fused." A trooper vaulted the barricade. Ceres met him with a baton strike to the helmet that shattered his visor. She spun, using his falling body as a shield against the next volley. She was a whirlwind of motion, but there were too many of them. A plasma bolt grazed her thigh. She hissed in pain, stumbling back. "Ceres!" Elias scrambled out, grabbing his pistol. They were backed against the console. 10 troopers leveled their rifles. "End of the line," the captain sneered. Then, the ceiling exploded. Debris rained down, crushing 3 troopers. A massive shape dropped from the maintenance vent above. Jax landed in a 3-point crouch, his ceremonial ribbons shredded, his armor scorched. He let out a roar that shook the walls. "Not today," Jax bellowed. Behind him, other cadets dropped in, the insectoid, the reptilian, the coalition they had built. They weren't fighting with military precision. They were fighting with righteous fury. "For the frontier," someone screamed. The room dissolved into a chaotic melee. Gravity plates malfunctioned as stray shots hit the environmental controls. Combatants were thrown to the ceiling, fighting upside down. Energy shields flared like fireworks. "Jax!" Sarah screamed. "Cover us!" "Go!" Jax roared, flipping a table with one hand to crush a loyalist. "I will buy you time." Saris grabbed Elias and hauled him back to the console. "The bridge is made," Elias panted, his hands covered in grease and blood. "But the software lock is still active. Voron has it isolated. We need an interface key to bypass the encryption." "We don't have a key," Saris said, looking at the blinking red access port. It was a crystalline matrix, designed for a specific data spike. She looked at her baton. It was Veliran tech, high-density crystalline polymer, conductive. "Yes, we do," she said. She looked at Elias. "Cover me," she said. "Always," he answered. Saris jumped onto the console. She stood exposed, a target for every gun in the room. "Hey!" she screamed, her voice cutting through the battle. "Voron, watch this!" She reversed her grip on the baton. With a scream of effort, she drove the tip of the baton down into the delicate crystalline matrix of the command console. It wasn't a gentle interface. It was a stabbing. The baton shattered the port, jamming deep into the circuitry. The conductive core of the weapon connected with the server's heart. Sparks erupted in a blinding cascade. Saris was thrown back by the feedback shock, landing hard in Elias's arms. The giant holographic column in the center of the room stuttered. It turned from a calm, soothing blue to an angry, flashing red. Then, the screens changed. All over the academy, all over the fleet, all over the founding ceremony in the Grand Hall. Voron's face vanished. The sanitized footage vanished. In its place, the raw data from the Iron Lung began to play. A video of a village burning. A predator cadet weeping while being strapped to a chair. A document signed by the High Matriarch authorizing expendable assets. The fighting in the Nexus stopped. Troopers looked at the screens. Loyalists lowered their weapons, confusion warring with their conditioning. In the Grand Hall, 10,000 dignitaries went silent as the horror played out in high definition above them. "It is out," Saris whispered, looking up at the screen from Elias's arms. Her leg was bleeding, her uniform was ruined, and she had never looked more beautiful. "Yeah," Elias said, looking at the chaos unfolding on the screens. "It is out." He pulled her closer, kissing the soot on her forehead. "Now comes the hard part," he said. "We survived the lie," Saris said, gripping his hand. "We can survive the truth." Outside the Nexus, the sound of rioting began to rise, a tidal wave of anger that would wash the academy clean. Saris Vane and Elias Ward stood in the center of the storm. No longer cadets, no longer pawns, but the spark that had finally ignited the fire. The Grand Hall had descended into bedlam. On the massive holographic screens, the footage of burning villages and weeping cadets played on an unrelenting loop. The dignitaries in the floating pods were no longer politely observing. They were shouting, pointing, and frantically trying to open communication channels to their home worlds. The illusion of the compact's benevolent strength had not just cracked, it had shattered, and the shards were cutting everyone. Admiral Voron stood on the podium, his face a mask of sweating, desperate fury. He was shouting into the microphone, his voice booming over the chaos. "This is a deception. A Velaran splinter group has hacked our feeds. These are deepfake simulations designed to sow discord. Security, cut the power, cut the feeds." But the security guards were not moving. They were staring at their data pads, at the messages flooding in from the barracks. The cadets were not just watching, they were remembering. In the center of the hall, a phalanx of Predator cadets, Voron's elite honor guard, suddenly broke formation. One of them, a young Krell with heavy chitin armor, ripped off his helmet and threw it to the floor. "It wasn't a simulation," the cadet screamed, his voice raw with sudden, returning memory. "I was there. G4, we burned the crops, we burned them all." "Silence that cadet," Voron roared. "He is malfunctioning. He is waking up," a voice boomed from the balcony. Every head in the hall turned. Saris Vane and Elias Ward stood on the high overlook. They were battered, their ceremonial robes torn and stained with grease and blood. Saris leaned heavily on the railing, her baton in her hand. Elias stood beside her, his pistol holstered, his face grim. "It is over, Voron." Saris projected her voice, clear and melodic, cutting through the din. "The code is broken. The triggers are gone. You cannot command them anymore." "You!" Voron snarled, pointing a shaking finger at them. "Terrorists! Traitors! You would destroy the peace of the galaxy for your own vanity." "Your peace is a graveyard," Elias shouted back. "And we are done digging the graves." Jax and his coalition of rebel cadets burst through the lower doors of the hall. They were not firing. They were marching. They moved through the crowd of stunned diplomats, a wall of scarred armor and righteous anger. "Squad Carax renounces the Predator oath," Jax bellowed, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "We serve no master who makes us monsters." The room erupted. Other cadets began to tear off their insignias. Officers tried to maintain order, but their commands were lost in the wave of mutiny. Voron looked around, realizing he was losing control. He reached under the podium. "He has a weapon," Saris shouted. She vaulted over the railing. It was a 20-foot drop. She didn't hesitate. She used the gravity plating on her boots to slow her descent, landing in a crouch on the stage, 10 feet from Voron. Elias was right behind her, landing heavily and rolling to his feet. Voron pulled a heavy disruptor pistol from the podium, but he didn't aim at them. He aimed at the crowd. "Back!" Voron screamed, "or I start executing senators. I will not let you ruin my life's work." The hall froze. Voron was cornered, and he was dangerous. His eyes were wide, the pupils dilated. Saris saw the shimmer of neural augments around his temples, illegal military-grade combat enhancers. He wasn't just an admiral. He was a predator himself. "You speak of strength," Saris said, walking slowly toward him, her hands empty, her baton clipped to her belt. "You speak of necessity, but look at you, hiding behind a hostage, terrified of the truth." "I did what had to be done," Voron spat. "The galaxy is a chaotic, violent place. It needs wolves to guard the sheep. I made them wolves." "You made them slaves," Saris said, "and you made yourself a beast." "I am the future." Voron raised the gun. Saris didn't flinch. She didn't attack. She simply looked at him with profound pity. "No," she said softly. "You are just a frightened old man." Voron screamed and fired. Saris moved. It was faster than thought. She sidestepped the bolt, closing the distance in a blur, but she didn't strike to kill. She didn't break his arm or crush his throat. She drew her baton. With surgical precision, she drove the tip into the neural port at his temple. She didn't discharge a lethal shock. She discharged a disruptive pulse, tuned to the frequency of his augments. Voron seized up. The gun clattered to the floor. He fell to his knees, clutching his head as the artificial aggression, the enhanced reflexes, and the dampened empathy were stripped away by the static. He was left gasping, shivering, small and human. Sarah stood over him. She retracted her baton and clipped it back to her belt. "The tools of predation," she said to the silent hall, "can be used to disarm. We do not have to destroy what we fear. We can heal it." Suddenly, the massive screen behind the stage flickered. The static cleared, replaced by a live feed from Valera. The High Matriarch sat on her throne. Her face was pale, her composure visibly frayed. She looked out at the grand hall, at the chaos, at her daughter standing over the defeated admiral. "People of the Compact," the matriarch began, her voice trembling slightly. "Valera is shocked by these revelations. We were deceived by Admiral Voren. We believed we were funding a peacekeeping initiative, not a—" "Stop," Sarah said. She turned to the screen. She looked her mother in the eye, magnified 1,000 times. "Do not lie to them, mother," Sarah said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of a judge's gavel. "Not anymore. I saw the signatures, I saw the orders." The matriarch stiffened. "Saris, you are emotional. You do not understand the complexities of statecraft." "I understand that you sold my friend's world to buy a trade route," Saris said, gesturing to Elias, who stepped up beside her. He stood tall, not bowing, not cowering, an equal. "I understand that you taught me that history demands cruelty, that power justifies blood." Saris took a deep breath. She felt the eyes of the galaxy on her. This was the moment. She could destroy Valera's reputation forever, or she could try to save its soul. "You were wrong," Saris said. "Cruelty is not a demand of history. It is a choice made by cowards who are too afraid to do the hard work of justice." She looked out at the cadets, at the diplomats, at the cameras. "We reject the predator code," she declared. "We reject the idea that strength means dominance. We call for a new compact, one based on consent, on transparency, on the radical idea that a soldier's job is to protect life, not to take it." She looked back at her mother. "Valera can be part of that future," Saris said softly. "But only if you step out of the shadows. Only if you admit what you did." The silence stretched. The matriarch looked at her daughter, really looked at her, and saw not a compliant heir, but a leader who had surpassed her. The political pressure in the room was palpable. Senators were already drafting motions of censure. The matriarch slumped slightly. The mask of infallibility cracked. "Valera concedes," she said, her voice quiet. "We will support a joint independent investigation. We will suspend all cooperation with the current Predator program immediately, and we will begin the process of restitution." It wasn't a full confession. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was a surrender. "Thank you, High Matriarch," Saris said formally. The screen went dark. Elias let out a long, shaky breath. He looked at Saris. "You just stared down your mother and the entire galaxy." "I learned from the best," Saris said, leaning against him, her legs finally trembling as the adrenaline faded. "I learned from a stubborn human who wouldn't take a deal." Elias smiled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Let's get out of here before they ask us to make another speech." The weeks that followed were a blur of tribunals, hearings, and painful reckonings. The academy did not close, but it changed. The Predator banners were taken down. The conditioning labs were dismantled. The equipment melted down to build medical centers. It was a messy, ugly process. Cadets who had committed atrocities under mind control had to face the victims of their actions. There were tears, screams, and suicides. Some cadets, unable to live with the memories, fled to the fringes. Others, like Jax, stayed. Jax stood in the center of the old training dome, now repurposed as a rehabilitation circle. He was speaking to a group of shell-shocked younger cadets. "We cannot undo it," Jax rumbled, his voice gentle despite his size. "We can only balance the scale. Every life we took, we saved too. That is the new oath." Saris watched from the observation deck. She was wearing a simple instructor's uniform, stripped of Velaran finery. "He is good with them," Elias said, walking up beside her. He was in civilian clothes, a jacket and trousers, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. "He is a leader," Saris agreed. She looked at Elias's bag. "You are leaving." "Honorable discharge," Elias patted the bag. "Full pardon, and a ticket home to Cestus. They are calling me a hero there. Want to throw me a parade." "You deserve a parade," Saris said. She didn't look at him. She looked at the gas giant swirling below. "I don't want a parade," Elias said. "I want quiet. I want to sit on a porch and watch a sun that doesn't come from a projector. I want to forget what ozone and burnt plasma smell like." "That sounds peaceful," Saris said. Her chest felt tight. "You should go. You have earned it." Elias was silent for a long moment. He watched the storms. "And you?" he asked. "What will you do? Go back to Valera? Take the throne?" "No." Saris shook her head. "I cannot go back. Not yet. And I don't want the throne. I want to stay here. Help Jax. Help the new recruits. Teach them that a baton is for defense, not domination." "Noble," Elias said. "Lonely," Saris corrected softly. Elias dropped his bag. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. "Yeah," he said. "It would be." He turned to her. He took her hands. They were cold, as always, but his were warm. "I thought about the porch," Elias said. "I thought about it a lot, but then I realized I would just be sitting there, looking at the sky, wondering where you were." Saris looked up at him, her violet eyes shimmering. "Elias?" "The galaxy is still a mess." "Saris," Elias said. "The conspiracy is broken, but the pieces are still sharp. They need people who know how to fight the right way. They need us." "You would stay?" Saris whispered. "Here, in the place that almost broke you? Home isn't a place, remember?" Elias smiled, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "It is wherever we stop running. I am done running. Saris." "I am difficult," Saris warned, a small smile touching her lips. "I am demanding. I have serious mother issues." "I am insubordinate," Elias countered. "I am messy, and I have terrible taste in ceremonial robes." Saris laughed. It was a genuine, bright sound that seemed to banish the shadows of the dome. "Then I suppose we are a match," she said. Elias leaned in. The kiss was slow, lingering, and full of a quiet, profound relief. It wasn't the desperate kiss of the cave or the frantic kiss of the battlefield. It was a promise. A seal on a contract that said, "We are in this together, for the long haul." 6 months later. "Control your center of gravity," Saris barked, walking down the line of fresh recruits. "You are not swinging a club. You are extending your will." The class of 20, humans, Velarans, Krell, and species from the furthest reaches of the compact, struggled to maintain their stances. They were holding training batons. "Cadet Miller," Elias called out from the other side of the room, where he was adjusting a targeting drone. "Stop trying to muscle it. If Instructor Vane sees you using brute force, she will put you in the pretzel hold. Trust me, you don't want the pretzel hold." The class giggled nervously. Instructor Ward speaks from experience, Saris said dryly, raising an eyebrow at him. Elias grinned and winked at her. Saris rolled her eyes, but a flush of pink bioluminescence betrayed her amusement. A pair of young cadets whispered in the back row. "Is it true?" one whispered. "Did she really take down 12 predators with just that stick?" "My brother was there," the other whispered back. "He said she moved so fast time stopped. They say she flattened them before anyone blinked." "Focus!" Saris's voice cracked like a whip, though there was no malice in it. "Eyes forward. The legend will not save you in a firefight. Your training will..." Later that evening, the training cycle ended. The lights in the academy dimmed to the artificial twilight of the night cycle. Saris and Elias walked through the Gravering forest. The trees were still synthetic. The river still recycled water, but the air felt cleaner now. The oppressive weight of surveillance and fear was gone. They walked hand in hand, their fingers interlaced. "Jack sent a report," Elias said, swinging their joined hands slightly. "He found a remnant cell in the Asterian belt. He talked them down. No casualties. He said he threatened to call you if they didn't surrender." "I am becoming a boogeyman." Saris sighed. "You are becoming a deterrent," Elias corrected. "That is better." They reached the edge of the forest, looking out at the stars through the viewport. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and uncertain. The compact was still fragile. The scars of the past would take generations to heal. But as Saris looked at Elias, watching the starlight catch the gray in his hair and the calm in his eyes, she felt a profound sense of peace. "Strength," Saris mused quietly. "I used to think it was about being untouchable, about being a fortress. And now?" Elias asked. "Now I think strength is about how much you can let in without breaking," she said. She squeezed his hand. "How many people you can protect, how much you can love, even when you know you could lose it all." Elias turned to her. He kissed her forehead, then her lips. "Then you are the strongest person I know." "Saris Vane," he whispered. "I know," she smiled, as the artificial stars flickered on overhead, illuminating the path before them. Saris and Elias stepped forward into the uncertain future. They were no longer predator and prey, diplomat and soldier, or princess and outcast. They were partners, and they were armed with the only weapon that really mattered, the choice to be better. The galaxy was waiting, and they were ready.